Howdy champs, my name is Mohit people. Welcome to part 2. Let's understand the animation property in detail. Now the animation property we can write it using the shorthand or the longhand method. I'm gonna avoid the longhand method simply because there are so many properties to remember, and why not write it the shorthand way, which is actually much easier to write. Simple, uncomplicated. But if you were to write it the longhand way, you'll need to mention the animation name, the animation duration, the animation timing function, the delay, the iteration count, the animation direction, the animation fill mode, and the play state too. But we can combine them up all together in one single statement. The shorthand method, animation, the name, the duration, followed by the timing function, then the delay, the iteration count, the direction fill mode, and the play state, one after the other. This way you can actually mix up the order, but make sure that the delay is always after the duration. That's a rule of thumb that you need to follow. Okay, so as I said, let's understand the animation property a lot better, people. I'm not using Dreamweaver. For the second part, I'm going to use CodePen. It's an online editor. Whatever you write inside the HTML panel is what goes inside the body of the document, opening closing body tags. What you write inside the CSS panel actually goes inside the opening closing style tags or the external style sheet. Since I'm not writing any JavaScript or jQuery, I'll close the JS panel. Okay. In the opening HTML panel, people, let me start off with the div tag. Let me close the div tag too. Right, let me give it an ID of, let's say, box. Let's define box out here. Righto. Okay, let me start off with a width and a height of 200 px each. Excuse me. Then I'm going to use the background shorten property. I'm going to give it a background of #333, and this is the preview pane, people. Let me save the pen up, or the document up. We call it a pen. In CodePen online editor, you call it a pen. Alright. Let me also tell you that you need to use the vendor prefix -webkit- when you are actually working with WebKit browsers, but for other browsers you can skip that. You can just use the animation property in the raw form. Just use the word animation. Okay, now let's include the animation property. So animation. Alright, now the only two mandatory arguments or the values that you need to input are the duration and the name. So name, I'm gonna go with change, and 2s is 2 seconds, or I can even mention it in terms of milliseconds. That's 2000 milliseconds, right? But the name of the animation, which could be anything that you choose, and the duration, it's mandatory to mention this. Alrighty. Okay, but since I've called my animation change, I need to define it somewhere. I need to present it somewhere. Otherwise, how will the animation actually happen? And how do you actually do that? It's very simple. Use the @keyframes rule, people. This is the way you need to use. This is the syntax. @keyframes, and then the name of the animation, whatever you choose. All right. And then, I'm sorry. And then inside the @keyframes rule, you have to have a to and a from state. From 0% to 100%. This is the way you need to write it. This is the syntax, people. It's a to and a from. So to, let's say, a background color of yellow, to, let's say, a background of pink. Righto. So this is where I've actually defined the animation change. Alright, so notice what's happening out here. You see, the animation happens over 2 seconds. Which animation? The change animation. what's going on out here? Just the color background changing from yellow to pink. In fact, if I need to take a browser preview, I can just do something like this. Make a correction deliberately, and you will be able to see the change out here. Let me show that to you again. Yellow to pink, and then back to #333. Let me show that to you again. Every time you make a correction out here in the code view, you're gonna see the preview state out here, because the changes are real time, people. Whatever changes actually happen present themselves real time. So it changes from yellow to pink over 2 seconds and then goes back to the original state. Now this I could very well change from a 0% to 100%. This is it's equivalent of saying 0%, beg your pardon, 0%, and this is equivalent to saying 100%. It's one and the same thing, people. See, I'll deliberately make a mistake and then make a correction so you can see the preview state out here. So it goes from yellow to pink and then back to #333. Let me save the pen up, the document up. Let me hit the share button. Let's take up a browser preview, a full page browser preview. So yellow, pink, and back to #333. Righto. Yellow to red. Let's try yellow to red. Saw the change, people out here? Yep. So now I'm gonna deliberately in fact now I'm gonna insert the delay parameter of the argument. Let's say 1s. As I said, delay always comes after the actual duration. So the kickoff happens not immediately, but after a delay of 1 second, and then you see an animation duration of 2 seconds. So the delay, as I said, the order can be anything, but the order of the animation duration and the animation delay has to be this: first the duration, then the delay. Alright, and then people, I can even have multiple animations going. So if I have change, I can have one more animation going. Let's say change 1, and let's define that up. So just copy this bit, paste it out here, make change as change 1, and yellow. In fact, I'm not going to change the background. Let's go with the width. Let's say the width, and let's say from a 300 px to a 400 px. Okay, so if I were to save the pen up, so change 1 animation should also happen over 1 second. Alright, see the change. In fact, so this animation change happens over 2 seconds after a delay of 1 second, and change 1 happens after 1 second, which will take the width from a 300% to 300 px to a 400 px. So two animations are now clubbed together through this comma separated. Let me save the pen up. Let's take up a a browser preview. Give me a sec. Yep. So let me refresh and show you. So you see there are two animations that happen one after the other. So this animation kicks off only after 1 second, but this one, change 1, happens immediately. That is the reason why you actually see the width change first, and then the change of the color, and then it retraces back itself. It goes back to the original state. Anyways, so let's get back to the document. I'm not gonna confine myself to multiple animations. That was just to let you know, good to know information. I'm gonna go back to once animation only. Let me remove the second @ keyframes rule like this. I don't need the second keyframes rule, people. Right. But if I were to have the change of the width too, what I could have done is I could have put the width property out here. Let's say from a 300 px to a 400 px. Right, so I can club them together like this too. Control S to save the document up. Let's hit the share button. Yep, it takes some time to come up actually. Right, see the width change, the color change too, the background color that is, and it goes back to the original state. Right. Now we have understood what is the importance of the name of the animation, the duration of the animation, the delay of the animation. Let's then push in one more argument or parameter, which is the iteration count, or in simple words, number of times the animation should cycle through, should happen. By default it's 1, but I can push in a different value too. If I push 3 out here, see the change that's actually going on in the preview window. So it changes 3 times before it actually goes back to square one, or the original state, which is a 200 by 200 px gray square. Right, so this fourth argument is the iteration count, and then let's push in the easings, or basically what I'm trying to say out here is the animation timing function, basically the speed curve of the animation, or the time animation progression graph, how the animation progresses through the time. That's the easing function or the animation timing function. Let's push in that. In the simplest form, it's linear, which simply means not changing. It's the same throughout, the graph is the same throughout, so the animation progresses through the time in a linear fashion, not changing. Now the default is ease. The default is ease, right? And then you have other variations: ease in, ease out, ease in out, etc. And that is something that I went through at length in the previous part, people, so I'm sure that I don't have to actually discuss that a lot. Next up is the direction. Now direction, unless if you don't specify, it simply means that the direction is normal. When I say normal, it just means point A to point B, but then you have other variations that we have seen in the previous part too. We can go have it as reverse too. Basically, it reverses. It actually starts from point B and then goes back to point A. Or you could have alternate reverse, or simply let's start with alternate. Alternate. That's self-explanatory, people. Point A to point B to point A to point B. So back and forth, like a pendulum. Or we have alternate reverse. So basically starts from point B, then goes to point A, then back to point B. Right. But the most difficult of them all, the properties that we have discussed so far, was the animation fill mode. Was this one, the fill mode? You see, first things first, let me set the iteration count to 1. I'm happy to keep the easing or the animation timing function as let's keep it linear. Right, and let's keep the direction normal. Right. So this is the name of the animation, this is the animation duration, this is the animation delay, this is the iteration count, or the times the animation should happen, which is 1, which is also the default. Linear, although is not the default, simply means that the progression of the animation through the time should be not changing in speed, should be the same speed throughout. Normal simply means from point A to point B. Now, as I said, the most difficult property to understand is the animation fill mode. Let's read what the description says. Specifies what values are applied by the animation outside the time it is executing. Alright, so just before and just after the animation, the changes that happen outside the time frame, just before and just after. Notice people, notice out here, when the animation actually happens after the time frame is over, it snaps back to the original state. So this is something that is happening after the time frame. To best understand the the fill mode, please use the delay parameter. Although, as I said, only these two parameters are compulsory: the change and the duration. In fact, we can even skip the duration, in which case it'll just snap instantaneously. So it doesn't, no animation actually happens. It's like a snap of a finger. So that is not an animation. It happens in an instant. We don't need that, right? So you actually need these two parameters. Everything else is actually not mandatory. Now, to understand the fill mode, always keep the delay parameter present. Keep it on. Push the value in, right? Now, unless otherwise specified, it's actually none. The fill mode is none. You see, it goes from point A to point B, snaps back to the original state. So this is none. There are certain things which are best understood by the browser preview, and this is one such property that I can only explain best just by the preview. Let's see what forwards actually does. So if I change this to forwards, see, now the animation happens from point A to point B, and you see it does not retrace. It doesn't go back to the original state. It retains the last frame. It stays put there, right? So that's forwards for you. Let's check out the opposite, which is backwards. Let's see what happens when you use the backwards fill mode. It goes from point A to point B and snaps back to point A. Now you would argue this is the same as none. No, this isn't. You see, notice very carefully. You see that the difference between none and backwards happens when the animation kicks off. Let's show that to you again. Notice that it starts off as a yellow rectangle, not as a gray square, which was the case when we kept it at the default none. Let me show that to you once again. Now, when it was none for the first second, which was the delay duration, there was no change. Notice it again, people. For the first second there was no change, but when I kept it backwards, you see it immediately snaps to the yellow rectangle. So even before the delay finishes, outside the animation duration, the span, outside the animation span, instantaneously it changes the color, the background color, and the width. So that's the difference between none and backward. So it's not the same, that small difference, people. And if I were to change it to the fourth option, the fourth value, which is both, so snaps to yellow, goes back to the full distance point B and stays put there. So it's a mix of forwards and backwards. That is what is both. So I hope I could explain the fill mode. So when it was actually none, it started off as a gray square, it went back to that same state. When I kept it forwards, it started off as a gray square, but then it finishes off as a red rectangle. When it was actually backwards, started off as a yellow rectangle, finishes off as a me just check that backwards. Yeah, yellow to gray, and when it's both, starts off as yellow and finishes off as red rectangle. Yeah, so you see these are the small changes that actually happen. So now if you read the definition, you'll understand it much better. Specifies what values are applied by the animation outside the time it's actually executing. So that animation, the animation span, the changes that are actually happening just before and just after the animation happens. And to see that, make sure that you have a delay going, right, so you can actually see outside the time frame, which is 2 seconds, the changes that actually happen. And I'm sure that you have quite clearly understood the fill mode 2. So which is the other property that I have forgotten to discuss? I've discussed the delay, the iteration count, basically the number of times the animation should be played, the direction, whether it should be reverse or alternate, or alternate reverse, or simply normal. Yep, the play state, I'll be discussing that too. Yeah, before I discuss that, let me tell you people, you are not constrained to just use the 0%, 100%. You can have many more keyframes going. You can have a 25%, a 50%, or 75%, or you can have 0%, 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, and whatever percentage value you would want to insert out here. So let's do that. Let me let's insert a 50% too, a midway point too. So let's make that 50%. The background, let's keep it as lime, and let's keep this as 350 px. Righto. And in fact, yep, I'm actually, let's see the change. Deliberately I'm making a small change out here. Let's show that to you again. A small change in the code will reflect as an animation in the preview pane. Have a look. Why is it snapping? Okay, simply because the 0% is set at a 300 px and the initial state is a 200 px. Alright. In fact, there's a problem, and I figured the problem. The animation is not happening the way it should actually happen, and simply because I'm not supposed to be using a semicolon out here, people. Now you should see the animation the way it should actually happen. Yep. So from yellow to lime to red, and 300 px to 350 px to 400 px. Exactly. You shouldn't be making the same mistake that I actually made. Right. So you can have more than one state, not simply the to from state or the equivalent of 0% to 100%. You can have something like a 50% going inside, or you could have something like a 25% or a 75% inserted here too, as I had actually done in the previous part, people. Okay, see the animation happen now. So you see the animation, the fill mode is both normal, means the normal flow point A to point B in a linear fashion, and we had discussed the speed curve of the animation, or the animation progression through the time at length in the first part itself, which is technically called the animation timing function. Righto. So this is, in fact, in the last part I actually used 25% and 75% too. Of course you can do that yourself. I don't think so I need to actually go that deep and explain how that actually works, because I've used 3 states out here 0, 50 and 100. You can include as many states as you would want, and you are simply not restricted only to using background color and width. You can use the height, you can use box shadow, you can use the border radius property too. You can experiment with a lot of properties. Even the border with the border color, you can experiment with that. All right, this is just an example to get you started. Right, and there's just one thing that I need to explain, which is the animation play state. I can either have it as running or pause. So what I'm going to do is, in the hover state, I'm going to pause the animation. Righto, so animation play state, and we'll keep it paused. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to take this rule, which is this rule, people. Right, let's copy that up. Let's push in out here, and then in the hover state, the animation, what was that? Play state. Yep, play state. Let's set it to paused. Right, so if somebody hovers, the animation should pause. So deliberately I'm going to make a typo out here so I can actually pause it. You see the animation has paused itself. There again, there again, there again, there again. Right, so this concludes this tutorial, where I actually explained all the properties at length, namely the animation name, which could be anything, the duration, and as I had said time and again, that these two are mandatory, everything else is not. The animation timing function, which is the speed curve of the animation, the default is ease, but you have other variations like ease dash in, ease dash out, ease dash in dash out. You have different Bezier curves which accept 4 values. And yes, it's just one more thing that I would like to show you: steps. Right, so in order to understand the animation timing function steps, I'm going to make some changes. The first change is I'm going to remove this state, which is at 50%. I just want 2 keyframes, the one at 0 and the one at 100%. That's the first change I would like to see. This I'm going to change to forwards. This I'm going to remove the delay completely, and I'm happy with the iteration count of 1, or the total animation cycles to just 1. Obviously the linear easing or the animation timing function is going to change to steps. Let's say I would want to see it in 2 steps. Right, let me save the document up. Let's hit the share button. Let's take up a full page preview. So first step, second step. Yep, so you could see 2 steps, right? And I'm going to go back out here. I'm going to insert a comma, say end, save the pen up, hit the share button, take up a full page preview. So absolutely no change, people. So it stepped forward 2 times, towards the right 2 times. But if I were to actually change the end to a start, I'm changing the additional optional parameter end to start. Let's save it up. Let's hit the share button. Let's hit the full page button. Let's see what happens. So the first step actually happens instantly, doesn't wait, and then the second step. I'm gonna revert back to end so you can understand the difference properly. Let's save the document up. Hit the share button. You see here it actually waits for some time before the first step actually executes, and you actually see 2 steps happening. But when it was actually when we turn the end to a start, the first the first step happened instantly, and in effect there was just 1 step and not 2. Notice the difference, people. Save the document up, hit the share button, take a full page preview. The first step happens immediately. You don't see the yellow rectangle at all, and then it steps to that red rectangle. That's it. Right, so people, I hope that I explained in depth the animation property. I hope you like the tutorial, and hence you will thumb the video up, and hence you will subscribe too if you already haven't, and as a result you'll keep coming back for more and more tutorials from me, won't you? You have a good day. Bye bye. Peace.